Everyone thinks Kaleb Cooper is just the funny farmhand who shouts at Jeremy Clarkson on television, the one who can't understand why anyone would want a posh car, the one who once got paid 50 pence an hour and joked about it on a podcast. The comic relief standing next to a millionaire television presenter, there to make the show feel more real, more grounded, more honest than a typical celebrity vanity project. But that's not really what happened. While millions of viewers were laughing at Kaleb Cooper's jokes about Clarkson's incompetence, Kaleb Cooper was quietly building 3 separate companies, 3 best-selling books, and a net worth that's now approaching £1 million, almost entirely built on his own, running parallel to a television that became a genuine problem, specifically a school attendance problem. By his own account, he was moving roughly 600 eggs a week at one point, enough that his career now turned out to be far more useful to his future than anyone in that meeting could have predicted. The pattern didn't stop with eggs, planting and harvest seasons. This is worth pausing on, because it's easy to skip past as a charming detail, rather than recognizing it for what it actually is. Most 16-year-olds with an entrepreneurial streak start something low risk, a lawn mowing round, reselling trainers online, tutoring younger students. Cooper started a capital-intensive agricultural services business, the kind that requires functioning machinery, reliable transport, and enough trust from established local farmers to hand over their fields during the most time-sensitive weeks of their entire year. By the time Diddley Squat Farm needed help, Cooper wasn't a stranger to the land, and he wasn't a stranger to running something that depended entirely on his own judgment. He'd already worked there under its previous manager, a man named Howard Pauling, years before Jeremy Clarkson ever appeared with a television crew. When Clarkson's farm began filming in 2021, Cooper stepped into what looked, on the surface, like a supporting role. The young local farmhand brought in to keep an aging celebrity from destroying an actual working farm through sheer inexperience. Audiences loved him almost immediately. His blunt honesty, his total lack of patience for Clarkson's mistakes, his genuine visible love for the work itself. Reality financially was much less glamorous. Cooper later revealed on a podcast that during this period, once he actually calculated his effective hourly rate across the long hours the farming side of the operation demanded, it worked out to roughly 50 pence an hour. Clarkson himself has publicly backed up just how demanding that workload was, describing Cooper as someone who would drive up and down through the night tending fields, working what Clarkson estimated at 18 hours a day, without a single day off. That's the part of the story most casual viewers never think about. The person making audiences laugh every week was, financially, one of the most underpaid people in the entire production. Here's the question almost nobody watching the show in 2021 thought to ask. What happens when Cooper published his first book, The World According to Kaleb, part memoir, part rural life philosophy, covering everything from the difference between straw and hay to what he's described as the deep, unshakable importance of a good haircut? It became a bestseller. Critics could have dismissed it easily, a television sidekick cashing in on a moment of fame with a quick disposable book deal. That explanation might have made sense if it had stopped at one book. It didn't. A second book followed. Then a third. Britain According to Kaleb, The Wonderful World of Country Life, continuing to sell strongly each time, each one reinforcing the same brand rather than diluting it. Publishing an entire trilogy of bestsellers is a very different proposition from cashing a single willing to buy a second and third book from an author with no formal writing background, purely because the voice and perspective on offer felt worth paying for again. That's a meaningfully different outcome than the typical celebrity book deal, which usually sells reasonably well once, on the strength of name recognition alone, and then quietly fails to justify a sequel. Of course, not everyone believed this represented anything more than opportunistic timing. Critics argued that Cooper's books, like most celebrity tie-in publishing, would eventually run out of momentum once the novelty. He took a leave of absence from filming Clarkson's farm to launch something almost no other supporting cast member on a major television show has ever attempted. A full national solo tour, The World According to Kaleb, on tour, built entirely around his own persona, rather than the show that made him famous. That decision alone is worth pausing on. Taking time away from the exact show responsible for his fame carried genuine risk. A season away is a season where audiences might forget him, where a replacement farmhand might become the new favorite, where the platform that built his name could simply move on without him. Most people in his position would have judged that risk too high to take. He performed the tour across the UK, discussing farming, tractors, his very public disdain for sheep, and his often repeated jokes at Clarkson's expense, in front of audiences large enough to fill regional theatres night after night. The final performance, at Cheltenham's Everyman Theatre, was significant enough on its own that Amazon Prime Video filmed and released it as a standalone special. Think about what that actually represents. A farmhand who joined a television show as a supporting character had within 3 years become successful enough as an independent personality that the same streaming platform funding Clarkson's show was now willing to fund a project built entirely around Cooper alone. By the time Cooper was promoted to farm manager during the show's 3rd series, a genuine on-camera career milestone within the world of diddly squat itself, his life away from the cameras looked almost unrecognizable from where it had started. Company's house filings, the official record of company accounts in the UK, tell the clearest version of this story, because unlike television ratings or book sales estimates, these numbers are a matter of public legal record, filed and verified independently of anything Cooper, Clarkson or Amazon might choose to publicize. Kaleb Cooper Productions Ltd., registered in Whitney and established in 2021, the same year Clarkson's Farm first aired, reported total equity of roughly £910,000, including around £400,000 in cash reserves, with a reported profit of £666,000 for the year ending June 2024 alone. That single company, built around Cooper's own media appearances, book royalties and touring income, now holds more recorded value than most small British businesses ever reach in a decade of operation. A second company, Kaleb Cooper Contracting Ltd., the same kind of agricultural contracting business he'd first launched as a 16-year-old, more than doubled its assets during the same period, growing from around £52,000 to £96,000. This is the part of the story that's easy to miss entirely. Even as his media career accelerated, Cooper didn't abandon the original contracting business that started it all. He kept running it alongside everything else, growing it in parallel rather than replacing it. A third entity, Kaleb Cooper Holdings Ltd., added a further £46,000 on top of that. Combined, Cooper's total net worth is now estimated at close to £1 million, with some broader estimates accounting for future book and touring revenue, placing it even higher. Here's where this becomes genuinely interesting, and it's the part almost nobody watching the show week to week ever stops to calculate. Cooper doesn't own any equity in Clarkson's farm itself. He's not a producer on the show, and he holds no ownership stake in Diddly Squat Farm, the land or the brands built around it, Hawkstone, the farm shop, or the Farmer's Dog Pub all belong to Clarkson. Every pound of Cooper's near £1 million net worth has come from ventures he built entirely separately, using his television exposure as a platform rather than relying on it as the actual source of income. That distinction matters enormously, and it's the exact same underlying principle that's shown up in almost every successful diddly squat adjacent story so far. The television show was never really the business. It was the advertisement for a business built somewhere else entirely. Clarkson figured that out with Hawkstone beer. Cooper, whether deliberately or simply through instinct, figured out the exact same lesson from the other side of the camera, as an employee, rather than as the owner of the underlying farm. There's a nuance worth sitting with here, because it's easy to tell this story as pure triumph and skip past something genuinely uncomfortable underneath it. For most of the years documented on Clarkson's farm, Cooper was, by his own account, dramatically underpaid for the actual physical labor of running a working farm, 50 pence an hour by his own calculation, for work that regularly stretched past 16 hours a day. That figure isn't a joke he made up for effect. It reflects a genuine structural reality about British farming economics that this channel has touched on before, to become a television personality and published author on top of his farming work, rather than one that fixed the underlying problem for farmhands and contractors without a camera crew following them around, and without 3 million viewers ready to buy a book once the cameras found them. That's worth remembering before treating this purely as an inspirational success story. It's also, quietly, a story about exactly how underpaid skilled agricultural labor still is in Britain, and how much extra work it took, completely outside farming itself, for one person to build financial security from it. Even so, whether you view Cooper's rise as a genuine underdog success story or as a case study in how fame can be leveraged separately from fair pay, one thing about his approach is difficult to argue with. He never treated his television appearance as the finish line. There's been recent speculation, following the introduction of a new farmhand named Harriet Cowan in the show's 4th series, about whether Cooper was being quietly phased out. Clarkson has publicly addressed those rumors directly, making clear Cooper remains very much part of the show and the farm's operations. But the fact that Cooper's personal brand, book sales and production company were already financially secure well before that speculation even started says something important on its own. Whatever happens to his role on Clarkson's farm going forward, Cooper's actual business no longer depends entirely on staying in front of that particular camera. Most supporting cast members on hit television shows never reach that position. Their financial security stays entirely tied to the show renewing, season after season, indefinitely. If the show ends, so does most of their income. Cooper built something that would very likely survive the show ending entirely, a personal brand robust enough to fund books, tours, and 2 entirely separate registered companies, none of which require Clarkson's farm to keep airing in order to keep generating revenue. That's the real lesson hiding underneath Kaleb Cooper's story, and it extends well beyond one farm in the Cotswolds. For decades, the standard advice for anyone appearing in someone else's television show, someone else's platform, or someone else's spotlight has been simple. Enjoy it while it lasts, because it usually doesn't last long, and rarely translates into anything beyond the show itself. Most reality television careers follow an almost identical arc: a season or 2 of genuine popularity, a handful of paid appearances and sponsored posts, while the attention is highest, and then a slow fade back into ordinary life once the next season's cast becomes the new subject of public fascination. Cooper's approach suggests a different model entirely. Treat the platform as free advertising for something you build and own yourself, starting as early as possible, well before anyone can predict whether the original opportunity will still exist in 5 years. He was already running his own contracting business as a teenager, years before a television camera ever found him. When the cameras did arrive, he didn't wait to see how long the opportunity would last before building something independent from it. He started immediately, with a book deal within a single year of his first appearance on screen, and never treated any single venture, the farm labor, the books, the tour, the production company, as the whole of his income. Each one exists as a separate, independently viable business, which means the failure or ending of any one of them wouldn't erase the others. That kind of diversification is unusual enough among established business owners. Among 20-something farmhands who stumbled into television fame almost by accident, it's genuinely rare. Maybe that's the real story hiding behind every joke Kaleb Cooper makes at Jeremy Clarkson's expense on screen. Not simply a farmhand who got lucky, thrown into a hit television show by circumstance. Someone who understood, far earlier than almost anyone else in his position typically does, that being the most likable person in someone else's story is only valuable if you use it to start building a story of your own. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the business behind Britain's most unexpected millionaire farmhand, subscribe to Britain Decoder for more untold stories, hidden strategies, and the real economics behind Britain's biggest names. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.